Monitoring software is useless without something to monitor. We need to add a checkmk agent to our VPS so that checkmk server can retrieve information. To do that, you need to add a checkmk agent bash script and checkmk systemd service and socket definitions. You can get these files through the checkmk web UI, click on Setup, and then under Agents, choose the OS of the host you wish to monitor, in our case Linux. Under Agents, find checkmkagent.linux, copy the link, in terminal cd into checkmk agent directory, and download the file with wget. I'm using the -o flag to rename the file. It needs to be called checkmk agent without the .linux part, and I'll make it executable with chmod +x. Back in the web UI, find checkmkagent@.service, copy the link, and download it too. And the last file we need is this socket.fallback, copy the link, and download it with wget. Make sure it's called checkmkagent.socket without the .fallback part. We need to move these three files to their appropriate location on the VPS. You can do that by editing main.yml task or by adding additional tasks with Ansible's include tasks module, but I'll do it with a simple bash script. Open setuphost.sh. Nothing special here. I'm copying all three files to their appropriate location, and then I SSH to that host and I start and enable the checkmk socket. Note that I'm using a parameter to do that, so running this script with any host you have defined in your SSH config as a parameter will do these steps on that host. If you don't provide a parameter, this script will fail. Save the file, make this script executable with chmod +x, and run the script with a parameter. On the VPS, systemctl status checkmkagent.socket will tell us that it is active and enabled, and if I check the contents of this file, I will see that it is listening on port 6556. You can add a host through the checkmk's web UI or by using the REST API. Let's first do it through the web UI. Click Setup, under Hosts, click Hosts. Click Add Host to the monitoring. Host name is vps.do-p.com. If you don't enter an IP address here, checkmk will resolve this hostname and try to connect on port 6556, which is the port checkmk socket is listening on. Can this checkmk, which is running inside a Docker container, connect to the host on port 6556? I'll give you a minute to think about it. The answer is no. Network packet will leave the container using the default gateway. It will then try to connect on port 6556, but because there is no iptables rule that specifically allows that, the connection will fail. Let's check that in more detail. If I try to telnet to the vps.do-p.com on port 6556 from the VPS, I'll see the output from checkmk, because in iptables there is a rule which allows any connection from the loopback interface. But if I go inside the checkmk container with docker exec-it checkmk.do-p.com/bin/bash and try to do that same thing, telnet vps.do-p.com on port 6556, well, now we have another problem. This container does not have the telnet command installed. This is something you'll run into a bunch of times. You need some tool for debugging purposes inside the container, but the Docker image does not have that tool. You can solve that by installing it inside the container, but I want to show you a little trick. There's a Linux command called nsenter, where ns is for namespace, and with it you can run a program in a different namespace. What that means, and this is just one example, is that you can use a command that is available to you on the host, in this case telnet, but run it in a network namespace of a checkmk Docker container. I'll copy this command from the slide, then I'll go back to the terminal, I will exit from the checkmk container back to the VPS with Ctrl D, and I'll paste the command. This here will execute and you will get process ID of the checkmk container. You then pass that process ID to the nsenter command with -t. You tell it to use network namespace, and you run telnet like you're running it from inside the container, even though telnet is not available there. As you can see, this fails. We need to do the same thing we did to allow MariaDB connections from inside Docker containers. We need to allow any connection coming from any of the defined Docker subnets with destination port 6556. Open iptables.rules inside security files directory. Copy these lines for MariaDB, paste, and replace port 3306 with 6556. Save the file, open setup.yml, comment out checkmk role, find security role, uncomment it, save the file, and run Ansible playbook. Ansible has finished, and if I try to run the nsenter command again, I will now see the output from the checkmk. Let's go back to the checkmk's web UI and finish adding the host. Click Save and go to Service Configuration. checkmk will now scan the host for services. Click Accept All. Anytime you make a change in checkmk, it is not active right away. You have to click here on Changes and then Activate on selected sites. In the sidebar, click Monitor and click All Hosts. You will see the host you just added. Click on the host and you will see individual services of that host. If you see this pending, give it a minute and refresh the page. After about a minute or so, we can see that all services are green except this memory. Since this is our base level of usage, it makes no sense that it already triggers a warning. I want to see a warning when there's a jump in the usage, not always, so we need to tweak that. Click on the menu icon next to the service and click Parameters for this service. Under Check Origin and Parameters, click Memory and Swap Usage on Linux. Click Add Rule. Add some description if you want. And then you need to check these upper levels for committed memory. And you need to increase warning and critical limits. I will use 160 for warning and 180 for critical. Click Save. Click on the exclamation mark and activate the rule. If I go to monitor all hosts again, I will see that all services are now green. And if it is still yellow for you, you can force a check by clicking on this icon here and reschedule checkmk service.